In the heart of a forgotten valley, shrouded by the thick mists of time, lies the Manor of Lost Voices. It stands as a monolith of ancient sorrows, its dark silhouette piercing the horizon like a dire warning. Once a majestic abode, it now languishes under the weight of untold stories, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. Jonathan Avery, a writer with an insatiable appetite for the supernatural, had heard tales of the manor's eerie allure. Seeking inspiration for his next novel, he ventured into the valley, guided only by the dim light of the crescent moon and the haunting stories that fueled his curiosity. As he approached, the manor's imposing structure loomed over him, its windows like blind eyes watching his every move. The air was thick with an unspoken warning, yet an inexplicable force pulled him toward the front door. It creaked open with a mournful sigh, as if the house itself breathed a reluctant invitation. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of shadowy corridors and grand, yet decrepit, rooms, each holding the promise of hidden secrets. Jonathan felt a chilling breath of air as he wandered, the silence so profound that even his footsteps seemed sacrilegious. Suddenly, he heard it, a whisper, soft and fleeting, like the caress of unseen fingers across his ear. It beckoned him deeper into the manor's heart, where the veil between the living and the dead grew perilously thin. In the library, where books lay coated in dust, untouched by time, the whispers grew into voices. They spoke of tragedies long past, of lives cut short by betrayal and greed. The air pulsed with the energy of spirits unable to find rest, their stories intertwining in an ethereal lament. Driven by a desire to understand the manor's mysteries, Jonathan found an ancient seance room, its tables set with a velvet cloth, candles, and a tarnished silver planchette. As he initiated the ritual, the candles flickered as if in protest, and the room filled with the oppressive weight of expectant silence. The planchette moved, guided by invisible hands, spelling out messages from the beyond. "Beware," it warned, as the temperature plummeted, breath visible in the air. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that were human in form but tortured in essence. The voices crescendoed into a cacophony, each demanding acknowledgement of their pain and suffering. Jonathan, his mind teetering on the brink of madness, was drawn to the cellar, the manor's dark heart. Here, the cause of the haunting became horrifyingly clear. The cellar was a charnel house, its foundations laid upon an ancient burial site, the final resting place of those betrayed by the manor's lord, their bodies hidden beneath the earth but their spirits forever bound to the surface. Among the shadows, he glimpsed figures, their outlines blurred but their despair unmistakably human. They reached out to him, their voices merging into a singular plea for release. In the center of this sorrowful gathering, a darker presence lurked, its essence so malevolent that the other spirits seemed to cower in its wake. Understanding that the spirits' torment was anchored to the physical world by their unavenged injustices, Jonathan embarked on a quest to set them free. With each act of restitution, a spirit would find peace, their voice fading into the ether until only the dark presence remained. It was the lord of the manor, cursed to witness the suffering he had caused, bound to the sight of his unforgivable sins. In a final act of defiance, Jonathan unearthed the Lord's hidden confession, bringing his crimes to light. With the truth revealed, the dark spirit's hold weakened, and it was banished into the abyss, the manor shuddering as if releasing a long-held breath. As dawn broke, the Manor of Lost Voices stood silent, its curse lifted. Jonathan exited the manor as the sun's first rays pierced the valley's mist, the oppressive atmosphere replaced by a serene calm. Though he left the manor behind, the stories of those he had helped release would forever haunt his dreams, a reminder of the thin veil that separates sorrow from salvation. In the end, the manor's legacy was not one of fear, but of liberation, a testament to the power of acknowledging the past, no matter how dark, and the redemption that comes with giving voice to those who had been silenced. And though Jonathan continued his journey, the echoes of the manor's lost voices lingered, a ghostly chorus bearing witness to the darkness and light that reside in the human soul. Though Jonathan had left the manor of lost voices behind, its whispers clung to him like a shadow. The world outside seemed too bright, too loud, yet devoid of the depth and mystery that the manor held within its crumbling walls. His nights were filled with dreams of the spirits he had encountered, their voices now a haunting lullaby that spoke of unfinished business. Compelled by an invisible thread, Jonathan found himself returning to the valley, drawn back to the manor as if it had become a part of him. The house, now silent, seemed to greet him like an old friend, its door creaking open with a familiarity that sent shivers down his spine. As he stepped inside, Jonathan realized that the manor was not as he had left it. There was a new energy, a sense of something watching, waiting. The air was charged with anticipation, and the silence felt like the calm before a storm. Deep within the bowels of the house, something had awakened, a presence that had lain dormant, hidden even from the spirits he had freed. This entity, the unseen warden of the manor's secrets, had observed Jonathan's previous endeavors. It was neither benevolent nor malevolent but existed to guard the threshold between worlds, ensuring that the balance was maintained. Jonathan had upset this balance, and now, the warden sought to restore it. Jonathan was led by an unseen force to a room he had not discovered during his first visit. It was a chamber untouched by time, its walls lined with ancient tomes and artifacts that pulsed with arcane energy. Here, the guardian of the manor revealed itself, not as a specter, but as an amalgamation of all the lives that had passed through the manor's doors, a keeper of stories both dark and light. The guardian spoke, its voice a chorus of echoes. To leave a lasting peace, you must understand the full extent of what this place holds. Not just its sorrows, but its wisdom. Jonathan was to be tested, challenged to delve deeper into the mysteries of the manor and himself. The trials set before Jonathan were not of physical strength but of mind and spirit. He was to unlock the deepest chambers of the manor, each room revealing a fragment of the guardian's knowledge, stories that spanned centuries, from the profound to the profane. With each revelation, Jonathan's understanding of the supernatural realm expanded, his perception altered in ways he could never have imagined. He encountered spirits not yet at rest, their tales not of suffering but of lessons unlearned. These were not souls to be freed through actions but through understanding, their stories a mirror reflecting the complexities of human nature and the unseen forces that shape our destinies. The last chamber held the essence of the manor itself, its spirit made manifest by the guardian. Here, Jonathan faced the ultimate truth, that the manor was a crucible for the human soul, a place where light and darkness met and transformed. The manor's true purpose was not to be a prison for the lost, but a bridge between the seen and unseen, a place of passage and transformation. To restore balance, Jonathan had to accept his role not as a liberator of spirits but as a guardian of their stories, a keeper of the threshold between life and death. With this acceptance, the manor's secrets were laid bare, and the guardian bestowed upon him the final key, a deeper understanding of the unseen world and his place within it. Jonathan Avery emerged from the manor of lost voices transformed. He had entered seeking stories, but he left with wisdom, a profound connection to the unseen world that would guide him in his writings and beyond. The manor stood silent once more, its presence a beacon for those who sought to understand the mysteries of life and death. The valley, once forgotten, became a place of pilgrimage for those drawn to the supernatural, seeking the manor's wisdom. And Jonathan, now its guardian in spirit, continued to share the tales of the manor, a bridge between worlds, ensuring that the voices of the past would never be lost again. In the heart of the valley, the manor of lost voices stood as a testament to the power of stories, the echoes of its inhabitants a reminder that within every shadow lies a story waiting to be told. In the quaint, mist-covered town of Silverpine, nestled between whispering forests and brooding hills, there existed a peculiar antique shop known as the Timekeeper's Vault. The shop was an emporium of forgotten stories, housing relics from times long past. Its walls were lined with dusty clocks, faded paintings, and old photographs that seemed to stare back at those who dared to look. Eleanor, a young photographer with a fascination for the arcane, stumbled upon the shop one dreary afternoon. She was immediately drawn to an ancient, brass-framed camera, its body etched with symbols that seemed to dance in the dim light. The shopkeeper, a withered man with knowing eyes, warned her that the camera was cursed, said to capture more than just images. But Eleanor, ever the skeptic, was entranced by the challenge and purchased it without a second thought. That night, under the glow of a full moon, Eleanor set out to test her new acquisition. She took photos of the mundane, the winding streets of Silverpine, the gnarled trees at its edge, and the starlit sky above. However, when she developed the photos, she discovered something horrifying. In every shot, there appeared a ghostly figure, its form blurred but unmistakably human, its eyes hollow pools of despair. Terrified but intrigued, Eleanor embarked on a quest to uncover the origin of the apparition. Each night, she took more photos, and each day, the figure grew clearer, as if approaching from a great distance. She researched the history of the camera, learning of its last owner, a photographer named Jonathan Harker who vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. As the apparition grew closer, Eleanor began to experience chilling occurrences, whispers in the dark, objects moving on their own, and a constant feeling of being watched. Despite her fear, she continued, compelled by a force she couldn't understand. Finally, one night, the figure appeared in full clarity. It was Jonathan Harker, or what remained of him, trapped within the confines of the camera. With eyes that pleaded for release, he revealed the truth through a series of haunting images. He had been consumed by an ancient entity, a collector of souls, which now sought Eleanor as its next vessel. Eleanor realized that to save herself and free Jonathan, she had to confront the entity. Armed with her camera, she captured a photo of the mirror where she first saw the apparition beside her reflection. As the flash illuminated the darkness, the entity materialized, a vortex of shadows and malice. With every ounce of courage, Eleanor focused the camera, the entity's screams piercing the night. She pressed the shutter button, trapping it within a photograph. The entity disintegrated, its hold on our world severed, leaving behind a single, blackened photo. Exhausted and shaken, Eleanor found Jonathan's spirit freed, his apparition no longer appearing in the photos. She had vanquished the entity, but the cost was great. The camera was destroyed in the process, its curse lifted but its legacy forever imprinted in the annals of Silverpine's history. Eleanor emerged from the ordeal changed. She continued to photograph, but never again with the reckless curiosity of youth. Instead, she captured images with respect for the unseen worlds that parallel our own, knowing that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. The ghostly figure in her photos served as a grim reminder of the thin veil between life and the afterlife, and of the courage it takes to confront the unknown. Months turned into years, and Eleanor's encounter with the supernatural became a legend in Silverpine, whispered among the townsfolk with a mix of fear and fascination. Yet, for Eleanor, the events of that fateful night were more than just a story, they were a turning point in her life. She had faced the unknown, touched the other side, and returned. But the shadows of the past never truly leave, and Eleanor knew this better than anyone. As the years passed, Eleanor became a guardian of sorts, a protector of the veil between worlds. She researched ancient texts and artifacts, learning all she could about the supernatural forces that lurk in the shadows. Her photography took on a new purpose, not just to capture beauty, but to reveal and understand the mysteries that exist just beyond human perception. However, peace is often fleeting for those who walk the line between light and darkness. A new mystery emerged when children in the town began to speak of seeing a shadow man in their dreams, a figure that seemed eerily familiar to the one Eleanor had encountered. This time, however, the apparition was not confined to photographs. It appeared in reflections, on television screens, and even in the shadows of rooms. Eleanor realized that by capturing the entity in a photograph, she had not destroyed it but merely changed its form. It was now bound to the realm of reflections, seeking a way back into the world. The entity had grown stronger, feeding off the fears of those it haunted, and it was only a matter of time before it found a way to break free. Determined to stop the entity once and for all, Eleanor delved deeper into her research. She discovered an ancient ritual that could banish the entity to the void, a place of nothingness where it could no longer harm anyone. The ritual required a mirror that had never reflected a living soul, a candle made from the wax of 1,000 dead bees, and the recitation of an incantation that had been lost to time. The search for these items took Eleanor on a journey through the dark underbelly of the supernatural world, where she encountered spirits, demons, and entities of all kinds. Each step brought her closer to the ritual but also deeper into danger. Yet, Eleanor's resolve never wavered. She had faced death once and was prepared to do so again if it meant saving the innocent. On a stormy night, with the veil between worlds at its thinnest, Eleanor performed the ritual. The entity, drawn to the power of the incantation, emerged from the shadows, its form more terrifying than ever. It was a battle of wills, with Eleanor using every ounce of her strength and knowledge to bind the entity to the void. As the final words of the incantation were spoken, a blinding light filled the room, and the entity was gone, banished to a place from which there was no return. The aftermath left Eleanor weakened but victorious. She had saved Silverpine and perhaps even the world from a darkness beyond comprehension. Her actions that night became the stuff of legend, a tale of courage and determination that would be told for generations. Eleanor's life eventually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but she remained vigilant, always watching for signs of the supernatural. She knew that the world was full of mysteries and that darkness could lurk in the most unexpected places. But she also knew that there were always those willing to stand in the light, to face the darkness, and to protect the world from the shadows that seek to consume it. And so, Eleanor continued her work, a beacon of hope in a world filled with shadows, reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will stand against the night. In the heart of Eldritch High, where the hallways whispered secrets older than the town itself, there existed a room shrouded in tales darker than the shadows that danced beneath its door, Room 404. A room that, according to legend, did not belong to our world but to another, where time crawled on hands and knees, if it dared to move at all. It was said that students assigned to detention in Room 404 were never seen again, swallowed by an abyss from which there was no return. But like all tales woven from the fabric of fear and curiosity, the truth was far more sinister, a reality that Nolan, a skeptic by nature and a rebel by choice, was about to uncover. Nolan's transgression was minor, a prank gone wrong, harmless but for the pride it wounded. The punishment, however, felt disproportionate: detention in Room 404. Must be a clerical error, he thought, as everyone knew Room 404 was off-limits, a place of schoolyard ghost stories and whispered warnings. Yet, the slip of paper clenched in his hand was unambiguous, its black ink a stark decree against the paleness of his skin. He arrived as twilight bled its last light, painting the sky in hues of despair. The hallway leading to Room 404 felt unfamiliar, longer, as if stretching towards infinity under the watchful gaze of flickering lights. The door, aged oak with numbers that shimmered with an eerie luminescence, stood slightly ajar, inviting or warning. He couldn't decide. Stepping inside, Nolan found the room unnaturally vast, far larger than its exterior suggested. Desks lay in precise rows, each shadowed by an oppressive silence that hung heavy in the air, a silence punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic ticking of a clock that Nolan couldn't locate. The walls, adorned with portraits, seemed to watch him, their eyes following his every move with an intensity that quickened his pulse. No sooner had he taken a seat, the door shut with a thunderous finality, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights flickered back to life, Nolan was not alone. Figures, spectral and blurred at the edges as if viewed through water, filled the once empty seats. Students, he realized, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and despair, their eyes hollow, gazing into voids only they could see. A voice, ancient and cold as the grave, echoed through the room, its source unseen. Welcome to detention, Nolan. Your lesson begins now. The words slithered around him, a serpent constricting its prey. He tried to respond, to demand answers, but found his voice swallowed by the thick air. The room shifted then, walls undulating like the chest of some slumbering beast. Desks and specters vanished, replaced by an endless library, its shelves stretching into darkness, books bound in skins that whispered secrets meant to be forgotten. Nolan's heart raced as he realized the room was alive, a living, breathing entity, and he was trapped within its bowels. Time lost meaning as Nolan wandered the labyrinthine aisles, each turn revealing horrors more unspeakable than the last, paintings that moaned in agony, their canvases depicting scenes of torment, statues that wept blood, their cries for mercy echoing off stone, books that screamed when opened, their pages filled with nightmares made manifest that I end this realm of endless night. Nolan encountered others like him, students who had vanished, trapped in moments of eternal detention. Some had succumbed to madness, their minds fractured by the ceaseless terror. Others searched still for an exit, hope a fragile flame flickering in the darkness. The realization dawned on Nolan then, a truth as chilling as the air that pressed against his skin. Room 404 was a prison, not of brick and mortar, but of fear and despair. A place where time did indeed stand still, for it fed on the moments stolen from its captives, growing stronger with each soul it devoured. Determination ignited within Nolan, a defiance against the darkness that sought to consume him. He refused to become another shadow, another whispered warning in the hallways of Eldritch High. With resolve as his shield and courage as his sword, he navigated the nightmares, each step a battle, each breath a victory. Hours, days, perhaps even years passed in his quest for freedom, time an unreliable narrator in the story of his escape. And when he finally emerged, blinking against the light of a sun he feared he'd never see again, Nolan was changed. The schoolyard seemed smaller, the world beyond the gates less intimidating, but room 404 remained, a door forever closed yet endlessly open, waiting for its next victim. Nolan knew the truth now, a truth he bore like a scar upon his soul. Some rooms should never be entered, for some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Eldritch High stood silent, a sentinel watching as Nolan walked away, his footsteps a testament to his survival. Yet within its walls, in a room that defied logic and time, the clock ticked on, a heart beating in the dark, waiting for the bell to ring, signaling the start of another never-ending detention. As Nolan distanced himself from the school, the weight of his experience hung heavily upon him, a cloak woven from threads of darkness and light. The world around him seemed altered, as if he had crossed through a veil into a reality subtly shifted. People passed by, caught up in the minutiae of their daily lives, oblivious to the shadows that danced at the edge of perception, shadows Nolan could now see all too clearly. He found himself walking the streets without direction, his mind a tumult of thoughts and memories, replaying his time in room 404. The specters of students trapped in perpetual detention haunted him, their faces etched into his memory, a gallery of the lost and the damned. He wondered about their stories, their lives before they became prisoners of the room. How many had been forgotten? How many tales had been unwritten, lost to the hunger of that eldritch space? Nolan's journey led him unwittingly back to the heart of the town, to the public library that stood as a beacon of knowledge and a bastion against ignorance. The irony was not lost on him. The sanctuary of one library contrasted starkly with the prison of another. The building beckoned to him, a whisper in the back of his mind urging him forward. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books, a comforting aroma that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He wandered the aisles, fingers trailing along the spines of countless volumes, each a world unto itself, a safe harbor from the storm that raged within him. It was here, amidst the quiet solace of the written word, that Nolan found his purpose. That he began to research, to delve into the history of Eldritch High and room 404. The library's archives, a dusty labyrinth of records and newspaper clippings, revealed a tapestry of events woven from tragedy and mystery. Disappearances dating back decades, each linked to the school, each a thread leading back to room 404. The room was a nexus, a point where the fabric of reality wore thin, allowing the darkness to seep through. Nolan's resolve hardened. He could not, would not, allow the cycle to continue. Armed with knowledge and fueled by the need to act, he reached out to those who had lost loved ones to the room, gathering their stories, their pain, and their hope. Together, they formed a coalition, a group bound by a common goal, to seal room 404 and prevent further loss. Their efforts were met with resistance, skepticism from authorities, and ridicule from peers. But Nolan pressed on, driven by the memories of those spectral students, by the promise of liberation from fear. He organized vigils, spoke at school board meetings, and wrote articles for the local paper, each action a stone cast into the waters of apathy, creating ripples that spread and grew. And then, the breakthrough. A sympathetic ear in the local government, a councilwoman with a personal connection to one of the missing, lent her support to Nolan's cause. With her backing, an investigation into Eldritch High and Room 404 was launched, bringing to light the suffering and sorrow that had been hidden in the shadows. The room was closed, sealed off not just with locks and chains, but with rites and rituals, words of power spoken by those who walked the line between worlds. A barrier was erected, a ward against the darkness, containing the malevolence within. Nolan stood outside the school, watching as the final seal was put in place, a mixture of relief and sorrow in his heart. Relief that no more would be lost to room 404, sorrow for those who remained trapped within its walls, beyond help or hope. The sun set on Eldritch High, casting long shadows across the grounds. Nolan turned his back on the school, on the room that had taken so much from so many. He walked away, his steps echoing in the silence of the coming night, but the battle was not over. Nolan knew that darkness lurked in many corners of the world, in places seen and unseen. Room 404 was but one of many doors best left unopened. With resolve in his heart and a newfound purpose, Nolan dedicated himself to the fight against the unseen, a guardian against the darkness, a beacon for those lost in the shadows. And though he walked alone, the spirits of those he had fought for walked with him, a silent legion bearing witness to the courage of one who dared to stand against the darkness and emerge into the light. In the heart of a forgotten landscape, where the mist clings to the earth like a shroud, there lies a set of ancient, abandoned railway tracks. These tracks, concealed by overgrowth and the relentless passage of time, hold a secret known only to a few, a secret of a ghostly train that appears as a specter in the night, carrying with it tales of sorrow, mystery, and the supernatural. This is the story of the Phantom Train, a journey into the unknown that begins on a cold, moonless night. As the clock struck midnight, Ethan, a young, ambitious writer with a penchant for the paranormal, found himself standing at the edge of the forgotten tracks. He had heard the legends, whispers of a phantom train that emerged from the depths of nowhere, beckoning the curious and the brave to uncover its mysteries. Armed with nothing but his notebook and a lantern, Ethan stepped onto the tracks, the gravel crunching beneath his feet. As he began his descent into the abyss of the unknown, the air was thick with fog, and the silence was broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the anticipation of what was to come. He had walked what felt like miles when suddenly, a faint, eerie whistle pierced the silence, sending a wave of fear through his heart. The sound grew louder, and out of the fog emerged the phantom train, its ancient engine glowing with a ghostly light, its wheels screeching against the rusted tracks. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest as the train came to a halt before him. The doors creaked open, revealing an interior that defied time itself. The carriages were adorned with plush, velvet seats, and dim, flickering lights that cast eerie shadows on the walls. But what caught Ethan's attention were the passengers, ghostly figures clothed in attire from centuries past, their faces pale and their eyes hollow, each with their own story of unfulfilled destinies and eternal wanderings. As the train began its journey into the night, Ethan realized he was not merely a passenger but a witness to the tales of those who had once boarded the train with hopes and dreams, only to become prisoners of its endless voyage. Each ghostly passenger shared their story with Ethan, tales of love lost, of battles fought in vain, of lives cut short by tragedy. With every story, Ethan felt the weight of their sorrows, the train becoming a vessel not just of bodies, but of lost souls seeking redemption or release. As the night waned, the train plunged into a realm where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. Ethereal figures danced in the mist outside the windows, ancient ruins passed by, untouched by time, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist. Ethan realized that the train was not bound by the physical world but traveled through the cracks of the unseen, the spaces between shadows. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, and Ethan found himself standing once again on the abandoned tracks, the phantom train vanishing into the mist as quickly as it had appeared. The night was silent once more, but the air was no longer cold. Ethan looked down at his notebook, now filled with the stories of the passengers, their tales etched into the pages as if by an unseen hand. As dawn broke, Ethan walked back to the world of the living, forever changed by his journey on the phantom train. He knew that the stories he carried were not just ghostly tales but reminders of the thin veil between life and death, of the souls that linger in the shadows, waiting for their stories to be told. And so, the legend of the phantom train lives on, a ghostly reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond the veil, waiting for the next curious soul to brave its ghostly journey on the abandoned tracks. In the days that followed, Ethan struggled with the reality of what he had experienced. The memories of the ghostly train and its spectral passengers haunted his waking hours and infiltrated his dreams. He became obsessed with the idea that he had been chosen for a reason, that his journey on the phantom train was not just a chance encounter but a call to action. Determined to understand the purpose behind his eerie voyage, Ethan began to research the history of the abandoned tracks and the train that traversed them. He delved into old archives, dusty books, and forgotten tales, each piece of information revealing a fragment of the train's mysterious past. He learned of a tragic accident that had occurred a century ago, where a train had derailed on those very tracks, claiming the lives of all on board. The incident had been shrouded in mystery and speculation, with survivors speaking of seeing figures in the mist and hearing whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Ethan's research led him to an old, secluded village where the descendants of those who had perished in the accident still lived. Here, he found that the legend of the phantom train was not just a tale to scare children, but a deeply ingrained part of the villagers' history and culture. They spoke of the train as a purgatory for lost souls, a way for the dead to seek closure and for the living to come to terms with their grief and loss. It was in this village that Ethan met an elderly woman, Miriam, who claimed to have seen the phantom train herself as a young girl. She shared with Ethan a tale of her lover, who had been aboard the ill-fated train a century ago, and how she had waited every night at the tracks for his return. One night, the train did appear, and she saw her lover one last time, his ghostly figure reaching out to her from a carriage window, his eyes filled with both love and sorrow. It was then that she understood that the train was a messenger between the worlds of the living and the dead, a chance for farewells that had never been said, for love that never died. Emboldened by Miriam's story, Ethan realized that his own encounter with the phantom train was a gift, a chance to bring solace to those haunted by loss and to bridge the gap between the past and the present. He began to write, not just of his own experiences, but of the stories of the passengers he had met, of Miriam's undying love, and of the train that carried the souls of the departed. Ethan's writings were published, and the story of the phantom train captured the imagination of the world. People from all walks of life were drawn to the abandoned tracks, seeking answers, closure, or simply the thrill of encountering the supernatural. But to Ethan, the tracks had become a sacred place, a thin line between two worlds where the living could touch the ethereal and the dead could find peace. Years passed, and Ethan's name became synonymous with the phantom train. He continued to visit the tracks, always at midnight, always alone. Some nights, the train would appear, and he would board it once again, each journey revealing new stories, new sorrows, and new hope. Ethan came to understand that the phantom train was more than just a ghostly legend. It was a symbol of humanity's enduring spirit, of the love and loss that bind us all, of the journey we must all take into the unknown. And though he grew old, his belief in the power of the train and its stories never waned. For in the end, Ethan knew that the phantom train would one day come for him, not as a specter of death, but as a final voyage to the great beyond, where all stories find their end and all souls find their home.